And we begin right now at 6 with some breaking news to tell you about. 7 people now confirmed dead after a vintage plane crash sent smoke and flames shooting into the air at Bradley International Airport in Connecticut. Tonight, the investigation into what went wrong only just beginning. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Shannon Malaire.
And I'm Phil Lipoff. That vintage B-17 bomber was only minutes into its flight this morning when it turned around to land and then crashed into a de-icing facility at the airport, leaving a devastating scene behind. We are awaiting an update from the NTSB in Windsor Locks momentarily, and we're going to bring that to you when it happens.
In the meantime, we do have team coverage for you tonight. Ryan Kath has more on the air traffic control transmissions. Caroline Conley is outside the Massachusetts Foundation that runs the plane tours.
But we're going to begin with our Alicia Palumbo. Alicia.
Well, the airport here reopening this afternoon at about 2. One runway here is open at this point. The runway where the crash happened is still swarmed with investigators as they continue this investigation. As you said, just learning moments ago that 7 people have died in this crash. At least 7 people have died and 7 others are injured after this fiery crash at Bradley International Airport, according to a Connecticut state official.
Huge explosion. And then big black smoke came from the explosion.
Airport officials say it was a World War II Boeing B-17 plane being flown as part of the Wings of Freedom Traveling History exhibit that crashed at the Windsor Locks, Connecticut airport around 10 a.m. Wednesday, just minutes after takeoff.
5 minutes into the flight, the aircraft indicated to the tower that they were experiencing some type of problem with the aircraft. We did observe that the aircraft was not gaining altitude.
Investigators say the 1944 vintage plane, one of only 18 B-17s remaining in this country, was carrying 3 crew members and 10 passengers on a paid tour. They say the plane circled the airport to try to land just before the crash.
Unfortunately, upon touchdown, the aircraft obviously lost control, struck what's known as our de-icing facility here.
1 maintenance worker on the ground and all 13 people on the plane were either injured or killed. At least 6 people were transported to the hospital for treatment, one of whom has been identified as a member of the Connecticut Air National Guard.
There's a real need for scrutiny and oversight if these planes are going to continue to fly. And it isn't the first, and we want to make sure it's the last of this kind of tragedy.
And that may be one thing the NTSB is looking at in this investigation. And NTSB records actually show that this plane had crashed once before back in 1987 in Pennsylvania. It's unclear whether they'll factor that into their investigation. We're live in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Alicia Palumbo, NBC 10 Boston.
Alicia, thank you. Tonight we are hearing some of the conversation between the pilot and air traffic control as that B-17 bomber hit trouble, as you heard, almost immediately after takeoff. NBC 10 investigator Ryan Kath continues our team coverage.
Flight records we reviewed show the B-17 usually is in the air on these joyrides for 20 to 30 minutes. But within moments of taking off this morning, audio we obtained indicates there was a problem, and the pilot radioed in to clear the runway.
Boeing 93012, we'd like to return to the field.
And what's the reason for coming back?
We got number 4 engine. We'd like to return, blow it out.
You can proceed onto the downwind for runway 6, and you said you need an immediate landing?
When you get a chance, yeah.
Or 02, you could proceed however necessary for runway 6.
Okay, entering the downwind for runway 6, 93012.
A little more than a minute later, a dispatcher at the tower asked the pilot for an update.
How's your progress to runway 6? We're getting there.
It's the last time we hear from the pilot of the B-17 before the emergency response kicks into high gear and word of the crash quickly spreads around the airport.
Bradley Tower to all responding vehicles, no matter where you are, proceed to the crash via the quickest way available.
And is that one of the vintage aircraft over there?
Yeah, they crashed.
Damn.
An aviation expert from MIT told me it sounds like the plane had some kind of engine failure, but he added that pilots who fly B-17s are extremely experienced and have gone through many simulations of what to do in those types of situations. It will likely be weeks before we know the exact cause of what went wrong. Ryan Kath, NBC 10 Boston investigators.
Ryan, thank you. That plane that crashed today was part of a group of planes showcased by the Collins Institute, which is in Stowe, Mass. As seen in these pictures from Florida, which was earlier this year, actually. It made frequent stops as part of the tours around the country. Our Caroline Conley is live in Stowe with more on the plane's history. Caroline.
Yeah, well, we've learned actually that the executive director of this foundation is on his way to Connecticut tonight. And in a statement, the foundation said to us that their thoughts and prayers are with everyone on board that plane. It was a rare sight in the sky, a World War II-era bomber preserved for decades, until it crashed in Connecticut this morning.
They arrived here, I believe, on Tuesday.
Kevin Dillon of the Connecticut Airport Authority says the plane was part of the Wings of Freedom tour organized by the Collins Foundation in Stowe.
The Collins Foundation routinely displays these aircraft at airports around the country.
The B-17 bomber was a popular plane for tours offered by the foundation. Built in 1944, the Collins Foundation restored it in the 80s and made it part of their mission to preserve and share historic military vehicles and aircrafts.
This B-17, by the way, is one of only 18 in the entire country.
And it was one of 5 planes the foundation sent to Connecticut for their show this week. And in the hours after the crash there, flags at the foundation were at half-staff in honor of the victims. Now, the museum here was closed to all visitors this afternoon, and the foundation says it is cooperating with the investigation in Connecticut. We're live in Stowe. I'm Caroline Conley, NBC 10 Boston.
Caroline, thank you. And stay with us on air and online for continuing coverage of the vintage plane crash at Bradley International Airport in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. If you're not by a TV, not a problem. You can get the latest information in the free NBC 10 Boston app.